Story 1. Back in college, I was not exactly the social type. I did not get great grades, I was not part of a fraternity, I did not have a girlfriend, and I stayed out of most extracurricular activities. To be honest, I was not a particularly happy kid back then. But I am not here to complain. Life worked out just fine for me in the end. In my late 30s, I met a loyal woman who never stops rooting for me. Now we share a cozy life together, complete with 2 cats, Blue and Raz. I am even planning to propose soon. But back to college, fraternity parties were out of the question for me. That did not stop me from wanting to have some fun, though. Who does not want a little excitement every now and then? My 2 closest buddies, Brad and Matt, felt the same way. We spent most of our weekends hanging out in Brad's dorm room, but when an opportunity to party came up, we were all in. Most of the parties we managed to crash were off-campus and not affiliated with the school or its fraternities. One time, we even drove over an hour just to check out a party. Desperation? Maybe. Adventure? Definitely. One Friday afternoon, Matt sent a message to our group chat. He said the girl he had been talking to knew about a party nearby. Matt had a knack for attracting the quirkiest girls, if you know, you know. Brad joked that he was not interested in some weird, goth anime metal vibe, and I had to admit I was on the same page. But Matt swore up and down that this was going to be a regular party. Besides, we did not have anything better planned, so we figured, why not? Brad even talked his older brother, Greg, into being our designated driver. Greg was not much of a drinker and said he was up for a good time, so everything seemed to be falling into place. On the drive over, Matt started grumbling about the girl he was texting. Apparently, she had not responded to him in hours, which was not exactly shocking given how pushy Matt could be sometimes. Then, out of nowhere, he announced that her profile had completely disappeared from his phone. The rest of us pieced it together pretty quickly. She had blocked him and probably found someone else to take to the party. Matt sulked for the rest of the ride, but we were already 30 minutes in, turning around was not an option. We told him to shake it off and enjoy the night. When we arrived, the house hosting the party immediately stood out. It was enormous, especially compared to the smaller, run-down homes in the neighborhood. Matt needed a minute to take the edge off, so we parked a little farther down the street to pregame outside the car. We cracked open some beers we had brought and watched as a steady stream of people entered the house. From the looks of it, this party was going to be something special. Once Matt felt sufficiently buzzed, the 4 of us headed toward the house. The moment we stepped inside, something felt odd. For one, all the lights were blazing bright. There was no dim, ambient lighting you would expect at a typical college party, just glaring overhead lights, making the whole place feel weirdly formal. Then there were the people. Most of them were dressed to the nines, like they were attending a fancy event rather than a casual house party. It was not a total mismatch with what we were wearing, but the difference was noticeable. The music, too, was unlike anything I had ever heard at a party. No booming bass, no trap, no hip-hop, none of the usual tracks that get the energy going. Instead, it was this strange, ethereal music, almost trance-like, but not in a party way. It was hard to describe, but it gave the whole scene an unsettling vibe. We had no idea what we had just walked into. The music was strange, ethereal and a little trippy, with no lyrics, just an eerie blend of instruments. It was not bad exactly, but it felt off. My friends and I exchanged confused looks, trying to make sense of what we had walked into. Matt swore he did not know anything more about the party than we did, which honestly was not surprising. We decided to take a stroll around the house, trying to get a feel for the place. Alcohol was everywhere, so we figured we might as well help ourselves. As I sipped my drink, I started noticing something weird. People would glance at me and then quickly look away. At first, I thought I had something stuck in my teeth or maybe I just stood out because of how I was dressed. Either way, I tried to shrug it off. Despite the odd vibes, we were actually enjoying ourselves. Well, most of us were. Greg, who had not had a single drink, said he was bored and was going to hang out in the car and smoke. We let him go without much thought. Not long after he left, a small group of girls came up to us. This was new territory for us, getting approached instead of having to awkwardly start a conversation ourselves. The three of them wasted no time flirting, almost like they had rehearsed it. They joked about an entrance fee, which seemed funny until I realized they were serious. They were holding a bottle of tequila, and naturally, we were not about to say no. Not wanting to seem uncool, we took swigs without hesitation. From that point on, the six of us stuck together, drinking, chatting, and occasionally dancing. Things were going surprisingly well. At some point, I noticed something strange about Tina, the girl I was talking to. There was a thin, green line on her neck, like it had been drawn on with a marker. It was subtle, and I probably would not have seen it if I had not been standing so close. At first, I thought it might be some kind of birthmark, but it looked too unnatural for that, like it was intentionally drawn on. Green of all colors? Who wears green makeup? I debated asking her about it but decided not to. I did not want to offend her or kill the mood. Still, once I saw it, I could not stop noticing it. As the night went on, I saw Brad and the girl he was with slipping away upstairs. A little later, Matt followed suit with his girl. I was happy for them, but it left me feeling more nervous. I wanted to ask Tina if she wanted to head somewhere quieter, but the anxiety started creeping in. Even with the alcohol, I felt myself getting sweaty and jittery. I told Tina I needed to find the bathroom and that I would be right back. After a bit of wandering, I finally found a bathroom, but the door was locked. I waited outside until it opened, and out stepped this tall, older guy. He was dressed oddly, white button-down shirt, linen pants, and looked completely out of place. As I tried to rush past him into the bathroom, he bumped into me. I turned around, half expecting an apology, but he just stood there, staring at me with this blank, unsettling expression. It felt like he was sizing me up. As I opened my mouth to say something, I noticed it. He had the exact same green line on his neck that I had seen on Tina. Identical. Against my better judgment, I asked, "What is your problem?" He smirked and shook his head, then said in a low, almost mocking tone, "Who invited you?" Caught off guard, I stammered, Callista. That was the first name that came to mind, the girl who had ghosted Matt. His smirk vanished. He tilted his head slightly and said her name again, almost like he was tasting the words. Then he gestured around the room and said, "Do you see Callista here?" I froze. I had no idea what to say, so I just slammed the door in his face and locked it behind me. My heart was racing. What the hell was going on? I could not stop thinking about what he had said, or that green mark on his neck. Something about it all felt wrong. Really wrong. A part of me regretted not asking that guy more questions, even though I was rattled by the whole encounter. I needed answers, and fast. Determined to figure out what was going on, I left the bathroom and started scanning the crowd for him. As I moved through the party, I could not shake the feeling that more eyes were on me. People kept glancing at me like I did not belong. But I was too focused on finding my friends and getting us the hell out of there to care. The green mark was stuck in my head, so I started paying closer attention to people's necks. At first, I thought it was just paranoia, but then I saw it again, 2 more people with the exact same green line. Same color, same thickness, same everything. My stomach dropped. It was not just Tina and that guy, there were others. The more I looked, the more I noticed. Not everyone had the mark, but enough people did that I felt a growing sense of dread. I had no idea what it meant, but I knew it was not normal. Panicking, I made my way to the stairs, desperate to find my friends. To my relief, as I started up, Brad and Matt were coming down. I grabbed them both and pulled them into a quiet hallway, away from the crowd. I quickly explained what I had seen, the green marks, the strange guy, and how we needed to leave immediately. They both burst out laughing, brushing me off as drunk and paranoid. "You're just jealous," Brad said with a smirk. "We scored, and you didn't." I ignored him and asked where their girls had gone. Brad said his girl told him to meet her upstairs in 20 minutes. Matt nodded, saying his girl had said the same thing. Their complete lack of concern was infuriating. They were riding the high of their hookups, and nothing I said was getting through to them. Desperate, I told them to come with me so I could prove it, but they refused to budge. Just as I was about to give up, Matt turned his head slightly, and my heart stopped. There it was, a thin red line on his neck, just like the green ones, only a different color. I nearly screamed. That finally got their attention. I turned to Brad and insisted on checking his neck too. Sure enough, he had the same red line. Matt laughed it off, saying it was probably just a smear of makeup from his girl. But Brad's face changed. He was starting to believe me. "We're leaving," I said firmly. Brad nodded, and we both headed for the door. Matt, however, stayed put. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. I told her I'd meet her upstairs. Before I could argue, a random guy walked past us. He did not say a word but slowed down just enough to make me uncomfortable. He glanced at each of us, pausing long enough for me to notice the green line on his neck. That was the last straw. "Let's go," I said, grabbing Brad by the arm. Matt hesitated but eventually followed, looking over his shoulder as we left. It felt like the whole party was watching us. Their stares were heavy, like they were daring us to leave, but no one tried to stop us. We bolted for Greg's car and yelled at him to drive. As we sped away, both Brad and Matt's phones started blowing up. The girls were messaging them, asking why we had left. How could they have known? They were not even around when we left. Brad and Matt blocked their numbers without hesitation. To this day, I have no idea what really happened at that party. Everyone I tell the story to has their own wild theory, but none of them make me feel any better about it. All I know is that if that strange guy had not tipped me off with his question, things might have ended very differently. And that is not something I ever want to find out. Story 2. I am a graduate student working on a civil engineering degree at Purdue University. I started the program a few months ago, and, for the most part, life was steady. Classes were going fine, I had made a couple of friends, and I managed to find an apartment that was affordable. The landlord, I will admit, was a little shady, but I figured I could deal with that. I had a car, so the commute to campus was not a big deal, even though I lived a good distance away. The neighborhood was not exactly the safest, but I did not let that bother me much. I am a guy in my mid-20s, and I thought I could handle myself. Sure, life was a bit uneventful, but I was here to get a degree, not to throw parties. Everything felt pretty routine, until the day my backpack was stolen. It happened because I was careless. I left my backpack on a table in one of the lecture halls and stepped away to the bathroom. By the time I got back, it was gone. Just like that. To make matters worse, this particular hall did not have any security cameras, so there was nothing anyone could do to help me. The whole thing was frustrating more than anything else. My wallet, laptop, and apartment keys were all in that bag. I spent the next couple of days canceling my cards, getting replacements, notifying my landlord about the lost keys, and scrambling to figure out how to afford a new laptop. It was a pain, but I chalked it up to bad luck. Then, a few days later, I realized the situation was much worse than I ever expected. When I got home from campus one evening, I noticed a piece of paper slipped under my door. At first, I assumed it was a note from the landlord, maybe something about maintenance or rent. But when I opened it, my stomach sank. The note said, "I see you." No name. No signature. Just those 3 words. It did not take me long to connect the dots. Whoever stole my backpack must have gone through my laptop and figured out where I lived. That alone was unsettling, but then I remembered something even worse: my keys were in that bag. Whoever this was not only knew where I lived, but they also had access to my apartment. I could feel my heart racing, and every noise made my skin crawl. I rushed into my apartment, slammed the door shut, and locked the deadbolt. At least I had that to keep me safe, I told myself. Over the next week, more notes began to appear. Each one was handwritten, just like the first, and each one was equally strange. Messages like, "I know what you did," and "Watch yourself." I had no idea what this person thought they knew or why they were targeting me. I am a pretty average guy. I have never done anything shady or illegal. But if they had access to my laptop, who knows what personal information they could have dug up. I debated going to the police, but what would I even say? Someone stole my backpack, and now they are leaving me creepy notes. I figured I would try to wait it out, hoping they would get bored and move on. One night, I was getting ready for bed when something strange happened. My blinds were only half closed, and it was dark outside. As I turned off the light, I thought I saw a quick flash, like the flash of a camera. My chest tightened as I stood there, staring out the window. I pulled the blinds shut immediately and looked outside, but no one was there. That incident was bad enough, but then things started to get even weirder. I began noticing small changes around my apartment. Things moved slightly out of place. My shoes would be in a different spot than I remembered, or my coat would be draped over a chair instead of hung up. At first, I thought maybe I was just being forgetful. But then, one day, I came home and found my entire bedroom turned upside down. My dresser drawers were pulled out. My books were scattered all over the floor. My bed was stripped of its sheets. It looked like someone had gone through every inch of the place. I called the police immediately. But since there were no signs of forced entry and nothing had been stolen, there was not much they could do. They gave me the usual advice: be cautious, keep an eye out for anything suspicious, but that was about it. I begged my landlord to change the locks, explaining what had happened. He promised to get someone out in a couple of days. A couple of days. I could not believe it. I tried to argue that this was an emergency, but he dismissed me, saying it was not that urgent. Last night was the worst. I barely slept, even with the deadbolt secured. Every creak, every sound from the hallway felt like someone was about to break in. I am safe for now, but I do not know how much longer I can take this. I am seriously considering changing the locks on my own, but I have no idea how to do it without messing things up and causing damage that might cost me more than I can afford. The situation has gotten so bad that I actually called out of all my classes this morning. I am too afraid to leave my apartment. As I sit here, typing this out, I am trying to come up with a plan. If this person really went through my laptop, they probably know my class schedule. That thought alone makes my skin crawl. What if they have been timing their visits around when they know I am not supposed to be here? I have been thinking about trying to catch them in the act. Maybe I will hide somewhere in the apartment, wait for them to show up, and confront them. The idea scares me, but I am sick of feeling like a prisoner in my own home. I think that is what I am going to do. I will give an update as soon as I can. If something happens, at least this account will exist as proof of what has been going on. Story 3. I need to get this off my chest because it has been eating away at me. A little background first. I had just ended things with my boyfriend of 2 years, Luke. It was not the kind of breakup where you burn bridges, but it was not friendly either. We had been arguing for what felt like forever, and deep down, we both knew it was over. So, when we finally called it quits, I thought it was the best decision for both of us. I blocked him on everything and tried to move on. I go to Temple University and live in this small, old apartment near campus. It is nothing fancy, just a little place on the second floor of an older building. One thing about living there is that I can hear just about everything going on outside. A couple of nights after the breakup, I started hearing strange noises late at night. These were not your typical city sounds. No car alarms or distant chatter, this was something else. Footsteps, quiet shuffling, like someone was right outside my window. At first, I chalked it up to my imagination. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt it might be Luke. I was not scared because Luke was honestly one of the gentlest people I had ever known. He was the type of guy who would apologize for bumping into a chair. I figured maybe he was just having a hard time letting go and hoped he would get over it. I decided not to make a big deal out of it, especially since I had bigger problems on my plate. I had this massive group project due for one of my classes, and I was the person responsible for editing the whole thing and submitting it. The pressure was overwhelming. I spent all night going over the project, making sure everything was flawless. Just before midnight, I emailed it to our professor and finally went to bed, feeling a bit of relief that at least one thing was off my plate. The next day, our group was scheduled to present the video in class. Our professor connected his laptop to the projector, opened the file I had sent, and hit play. I was nervous but also proud. I had spent hours working on it, and I knew it was good, probably one of the best projects in the class. But then the video started, and I felt my stomach drop. It was not our project. Instead, what played was a grainy video of someone in a scream mask. They were sitting in a dimly lit room, saying the most vile, disgusting things you could imagine. They trashed me, my professor, and even made these bizarre rants about the government. I cannot even repeat most of it, it was that sickening. For a moment, nobody moved. The professor let the video play longer than I think he meant to, probably because he was in shock like the rest of us. When he finally paused it, his face was pale. I could feel every single pair of eyes in that room on me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. I wanted to speak, to explain, but no words would come out. Before I knew it, I was crying. I bolted out of the lecture hall, not even caring where I was going. I was shaking, on the verge of a full-blown panic attack. Part of me wanted to go home and never come back, but I knew if I just disappeared, would probably get expelled or something. So, I waited outside the building, trying to pull myself together. When the class ended, I approached my professor, desperate to explain. I pleaded with him, swearing I had no idea what had happened and that I was sure I sent the correct video. Thankfully, he was willing to hear me out. After checking his email, he confirmed that 2 files had been sent from my account. The first one was our project, but the second file, the one he played in class, had been sent later. The next few days were a nightmare. Clearing my name with the university took forever and involved countless meetings, emails, and explanations. I will spare you the details, but eventually, they believed me. It was obvious my email had been hacked, which was terrifying in itself. I changed my password and hoped that would be the end of it. But it was not. Less than a week later, I woke up one morning to find myself logged out of Snapchat. The only way that happens is if someone else logs into your account. My stomach dropped. I knew I had been hacked again. The thought of someone going through my Snapchat made me feel sick. There were things on there, personal things, I never wanted anyone to see. After things escalated, I finally decided to call the police. I explained everything to them, and to my surprise, Luke agreed to cooperate when they reached out to question him. The police quickly ruled him out as the culprit. He admitted to something, though, that made my stomach turn. Right after our breakup, he had posted some of my private information on an online forum. He swore up and down that he never shared my passwords, but the damage was already done. I had been careless, using the same, easy-to-guess password for just about everything. The police said there was not much they could do. Since Luke was not responsible for the hacking, their hands were tied. That was the moment it really hit me: someone else out there had access to my personal life. My private information was in the hands of a stranger. The thought made me sick. They could do anything: blackmail me, harass me, even worse. I rushed to change all my passwords immediately, but deep down, I feared it was already too late. For a few weeks, nothing happened. I started to relax a little, convincing myself that whoever had been messing with me had gotten scared off when they realized the police were involved. Maybe they had backed off for good. But of course, I was wrong. One day, I got a friend request from some random person on Snapchat. That was not unusual. I get random ads all the time. But when I added them back, they started sending me pictures. Not just any pictures, pictures of me. They were the kinds of pictures you never want anyone else to see. My heart dropped, and I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. I did not wait for them to say anything. I blocked them immediately. I knew what was coming next: threats, demands for money, maybe even blackmail. But I could not handle it. I was shaking and crying, feeling utterly powerless. It was the worst feeling I have ever experienced. For the next week, new profiles kept adding me on Snapchat. I knew it was the same person. I stopped accepting requests altogether because I was terrified of what they might do next. Every time my phone buzzed with a new notification, my anxiety spiked. I could not eat, I could not sleep, and I felt like I was constantly being watched. The worst part? There was no way to track this person. They were hiding behind fake profiles, and the police said they did not have enough information to take any action. I felt completely trapped. Whoever was behind this knew where I lived. They had been outside my apartment before. What if they decided to take things further? Every night, I lay awake, praying that they would get bored and stop. But the fear that they might do something drastic lingered. The thought of them showing up at my door, or worse, exposing those photos, kept me in a constant state of panic. For any young women out there listening to this, please be careful. Do not leave sensitive pictures on your phone, no matter how secure you think your accounts are. I wish I could say this has all ended, but I honestly do not know if it ever will.